Welcome to the Ascension Alchemist podcast. This is your host, Michael Abramson, and I'm so grateful that you're here with me today as this is my solo episode. And boy, do I welcome you into a week of quite transformation and change. How are each of you guys doing? Because it has been a whirlwind of a week. And have you guys noticed something out there that's been happening not only for quite a bit of time, but exclusively happening right now in our external level? The noise, the just chaos that's happening that we see all across the world, that it cannot be more evident in our awareness of what we're seeing today. And that's really what I want to talk about, because I have noticed something very deeply, not only on the outside, but this greater draw of connection within. And have you noticed this consciousness, whether we see it in the division of our politics, the division in our social media, the division in our families' beliefs, and even among loved ones? And it's almost like pointing to me in this level of division. What is it really pointing to? Because I've sat here and I've really started to look deeper at what's happening in the world, what's happening in Iran, what's happening in our country today. And it really comes down to this one word that I feel is one of the most important words that we can not only align to, but what we can embody to. And that is unity, which sometimes seem a very far cry in what we're seeing today. But what happens if unity is not something humanity has lost? What happens if unity is something that we forgot and then we remember moment by moment? Because I really feel unity does not begin on a global stage. Unity starts when we choose connection over separation. And the moment that happens, we choose that each and every day. Because isn't it the truth, the universal human truth, that all of us seek connection? I mean, I feel like whether it's our culture, whether what we've been brought up, there is this deeper connection where we want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to feel safe, belong, and matter. Yet somewhere, as I've looked upon quite a bit, there is this division. There's this separation consciousness that seems to push this connection away. And really, it's no other job to bring that connection within is ourselves. Because we have a choice. We have a decision whether we want to choose connection or choose separation. And right now, what I see is the outer world is showing a whirlwind of separation. But really what I see is that unity is the choice of connection within. But first we have to begin with, where does unity really start with? And I see, and I ask all of you, where do you think unity starts with? Without looking outward, I believe unity starts right within ourselves, within the heart of our compassion. Because if we really look at the word unity, it's drawing together in oneness. And that to me begins with the presence, where we look beyond judgment and we look to the presence of now. The peace in the presence, the pause in the presence, the calmness in the presence, because when we look at the presence, we're not fasciculating from the past or future where stress, worry, and fear exists. So what happens if we take unity one step at a time? And it's more or less an opportunity for us to see how we can look more toward our connection in unity versus separation. Because obviously, unity does not begin in governments and movements or global agreements, as you can see. Unity begins in the heart. And it's really each decision we make from that heart every day. It begins of how we choose to live from that heart in our love. And when we choose to really start to listen and understand versus try to impose our judgment or our nature in what people identify or label themselves. Have you noticed? It's so interesting because one that really stays the neutral line, and I have no judgment whether what party, what president, what culture, what religion you may identify to, but have you noticed in this time, in this era, people are using that hook as like their lost temperament of unexpressed emotion and energy to hold on that, to defend and explain till like they bring the cows come home. On social media, on news, it's like defending left and right. And if we haven't seen what this separation energy does, it just basically destroys the connection that we're all seeking. Because really, what does, if we look at the crux of it all, what does separation teach us? Separation as a label, it says you're different, you're wrong, you're another. But the deeper question becomes, what does connection do? Because if we look at it in a deeper lens, isn't every part of myself, every part of each other, a reflection of what's happening within? You know, when we look at ourselves, we're all living a unique lifestyle, but somehow we're all living it together. We're all breathing in oxygen. We're all connecting in a way that life force energy is moving through us. And so the illusion of separation that draws differences, that draws the ability of creating a lack of unity, really is an area that sometimes we all, I believe, should just step back and say, what is it that I'm really defending? And is that the truth? What is it that I'm really trying to express the difference? And is that the truth? Because many times when I look at this separation consciousness, we're just using stories that we see on TV, stories that we see in social media, and we're defending it. Yet, are we truly understanding the wisdom, the experiences each person's having, and listening from the empathy and compassion of our heart? Because that's where I believe true connection starts. You know, what happens if right now it is our duty, and I ask each of you that are listening, that have been drawn to this wonderful podcast, that Honey and I really focus on the alignment and embodiment of divine Almighty. We know that when we align and embody, that connection begins within. But when we're divided inside, that's where the true war starts. So maybe the journey really starts, instead of looking outwardly at the separation, what's happening within ourselves? Because usually as we see all these events happening, they draw a reaction to us. And that's where we really should start to see, what am I not accepting outwardly? Because somewhere, if I'm not accepting it outwardly, it's reflecting somewhere where I'm not accepting myself inwardly when I'm in that separation, or I'm in that situation. So I believe when we look at unity, it's not something we have to invent, something we have to create. What happens if unity is something we remember? Each time we're choosing compassion and we're choosing empathy over judgment. When we're choosing presence over distraction. And most important, we're choosing love over fear. That's when I believe we restore a thread of this fabric of humanity, because right now there's powerful truth in unity and connection versus separation. And even if you look at the characteristics of unity, doesn't it feel, when you even just say the word unity, there's a strength, there's a power, there's a security, there's a safety, there's a foundation. And imagine if one person starts to embody it, then another begins. Then it becomes a ripple effect where we no longer have to look outwardly to seek this unity through what we're seeing right now. We're actually embodying it and helping others remember that it begins within. I mean, really, when I start to see how this whole journey begins, I recognize in myself, the more I'm unified within my thoughts and my emotions and my feelings, there's less of a war inside of me. There's less of a feeling that I have to fight or express, because I'm already feeling this balance, this harmony, because I'm unified with the one power that I know that I come from, and that is the divine source. So what happens if that becomes our ultimate unification each and every moment? What happens if this becomes our universal divine truth, where we unify what we feel is natural to us: compassion, love, kindness, integrity, and we start to build and raise that through our actions and decisions, and we start spreading this through our communication and our ability to remember what it is that we came for. Because right now, this separation is really starting to divide many people. And it's sad sometimes to see how it's coming between friends and coming between families, and almost this remembrance of what happened when COVID came. And if you don't believe in this, all of a sudden you're this supporter. And if you support the freedom of Iran, you're supporting this president. When really it's just a bunch of labels, judgment, and illusions. But what happens when we start to look at the lens that all of this starts to break down of what is my truth and how do I choose to feel, versus trying to fit in outwardly by a system or a label that has been fighting for its own identity through many, many years. I mean, part of it is when we look at unity, it's really starting to see, okay, how do I unify myself and bring the awareness of where separation begins? Because separation, once again, when we divide ourselves, we start to see what is acceptable and not acceptable. We start to create resistance. We start to create challenge. But what happens if we just start to accept people's differences? What happens if we just start to accept our own dislikes? But we don't have to voice it. We accept it in a way that we could just find peace in that. And obviously, when it comes to be immoral or an area that crosses our values, then we have a choice of how we can demonstrate in our own life, versus what I'm seeing across the border, so many pointing fingers of what is right, what is wrong, when really that's just the dualistic value of the ego trying to place their projections on another person. Because really, inner healing in unifying ourselves is a collective healing. And so each moment we have a choice to choose connection. We can pause before reacting. We can listen to understand. We can even ask, how is this making you feel? And even just allowing these differences without withdrawing our love. These are all areas we could just choose to connect by creating a space. Because once we do that, there becomes this ripple effect. There becomes this magnification of the energy that we draw within ourselves. And for me, I feel like we're in this colossal moment. Us in the northern hemisphere, there is this seeding that we're planting. And as we plant these seeds, we're watering what we're growing for this beautiful spring. So it spreads and it evolves and it expands. So what thoughts, what emotions, what feelings are we choosing to unify with versus separate? And what do we do right now in this time where it feels like all of a sudden we have to take time to use more discernment versus judgment? Because every difference gives us an opportunity just to take a moment and see why it's affecting us and where within us we could choose to create less resistance. Because what I'm understanding about unification and unity consciousness is the less resistance we are, the more we flow with life. The more we flow with life, the more abundance and prosperity we begin. And the more we allow ourselves to flow with what I feel God Almighty is giving us every single day. You know, unity doesn't require us all to think the same. We're creative, unique, different souls that have come into this world that's shown what differences can make to evolve our uniqueness. Like when I stare at some of these flowers or orchids or plants and I see the differences of them, it makes me grow this beautiful wonder of like, wow, how does that flower smell? How does that fruit taste? What does that individual seek in their differences across the world that I may not understand or believe in, but they can help educate me of maybe some of the blockages that I've somehow created in separation due to the public condition. What happens if instead of defending, I'm understanding? So I don't separate, I connect just by hearing another version of what I've never been told before. It reminds me when I used to travel around the world and I would take a one-way ticket and I would jump on a plane. And I would fly to Thailand, Bali, and I put myself in very unique situations. I'd actually create a separation from what I usually felt in a normal, comfortable land. And I put myself in different situations so I could start to learn and grasp the differences of life. And what I felt was drawing a deeper understanding and awareness of areas that weren't familiar to me. And what was so interesting about that was once I shifted out of the discomfort from the fear of being in a place that wasn't familiar, I started to unify in the joy and happiness from eating and tasting things I've never experienced before. Talking to people from different nations and learning about their backgrounds that were completely different. It became this connection of growing and evolving. You know, a lot of times I feel we're all seeking this deeper connection. And what happens if this connection starts with the unity that we remember that we're all going through this life in this human body, having a spiritual experience together. We're all breathing in the same oxygen. Maybe it may not be as healthy or clean or clear or pure as others. We're all drinking water. We're all living each day. So what can we do? What can happen in a way that can just take a moment right now where we can focus more on the connection and unity versus the separation? Each day when I wake up, I connect to God Almighty. This is what I do. And then I visualize and feel the gratitude of what this divine source gives me every day. The joy and happiness to assist and help people. The great food that I get to cook and eat and digest. The great relationship I get to share with my wife. And I start to find this connection deeper. And in this unity of connection between myself and God Almighty, then I start to visualize and imagine this world in a safe, peaceful, free, liberated, so that it brings even more unification outward through my beingness, but even greater through what I believe one of the most powerful tools we can use in imagination. And as I do that, I start to emanate and express that feeling as if it's already happening right now. Seeing people hold hands from countries to countries, governments becoming less judgmental and more peaceful, and differences starting to dissolve, and our ability to connect into our hearts to evolve in a greater aspect. Because could you just imagine right now that we're not creating unity, we're remembering it. And we're choosing in each step, in each breath. I mean, could you imagine that as we take each moment of life and we just draw a deeper level of love for ourselves, care for ourselves, and value for ourselves, we're creating a connection that forms a bond within ourselves that we get to share with another in the wisdom that we've learned just by doing that. When we look at this human body of ours, isn't it interesting to see the connection in how the organs, the nervous system, the pathways of red blood cells, white blood cells, bones, cells, all unified together to make this life in one harmonic life. It works in unity. It works in connection. And if that could not be more of a greater visual of what we could all lean into and co-create, I don't know what else could be done, because our literally human body is demonstrating it each day. Literally every moment of life, our body is working in harmonization of as we breathe in and breathe out with life in connecting. As we exhale our carbon dioxide, and Mother Nature inhales that to then produce the oxygen that we create. It's that unification and connection process that forms the ultimate bond of life. Because really, connection happens when we truly become present of what this gift of life is presenting each and every moment. And I know right now it is not the easiest, because what I'm experiencing and seeing is the greatest level of separation, division. Yet what happens if all that separation, division is actually a tool for us to learn how important connection is, just by remembering when we feel more connected in our hearts, we feel more joy and happy that we get to live. And I don't know too many people out there that want to live feeling bad, maybe based on a unfortunate disease or a condition or addiction. But to me, the body has been designed to live good, feel good, in a way that it naturally responds to our positive feelings and emotions. Just as we evolve, just as we expand in this energy that connects and evolves us, so does that happen when we express that and live that in each thought, choice, and feeling that we get to share with each and every person around us. So I want to thank you for this deep dive of really seeing how we can choose connection versus separation. And maybe a little test for each of you. When we start to read the headlines, when news starts to distract us, when social media starts to pull us into division, where can we apply our own level of unification by connecting to the area that helps dissolve separation? For me, personally, I love to connect into love, because I believe that is the greatest power in this earth that we're here to emanate, to express, and to truly live in this life. And I've never seen any separation in love until pain, condition, programming starts to come in conditions. But the ultimate level of love is unconditional love. And there's no separation, unconditional love. Because we see that within nature. We see that within animals. We see that within almost every organism except the human, because we're now evolving out of condition and into unconditional. Out of what I call unconsciousness and into evolved higher consciousness, unity consciousness. Because beyond duality, it is unity. And that's where we're moving when we move higher and higher into levels that we're remembering who we are and what we came here to do. That I truly feel and believe we are moving in that direction. Yet the true game is to watch it on the outside and really see how you could choose not to respond in a way that causes more division on the inside. Maybe it causes you to give more compassion to those that could use it, send more positive energy that those are hurting, and maybe create more prayers and blessings for those that are not even aware of it because they're just, like many others, asleep, unawakened, and just following what they're seeing in the headlines, which gives us even the greater responsibility and task to understand why we're here and what our position is in our community, in our family. Because ultimately, it is up to our choice of who and how we dictate our lives. And when we're living in that connection within our life, and we're living in that joy, and we're living in that happiness, then all of a sudden separation easily dissolves. And that becomes what I believe is the mission, where we focus so much more on the connection and on the unity and on the presence that our body naturally evolves on. Then separation slowly dissolves, because then it just becomes a remembrance. Because we're choosing it, we're living it, and we're being it. And to me, when we can be the fullest expression of ourselves, we're living the greatest version of ourselves, then we're allowing God Almighty and the divinity to come through us, and we just become the walking vessels of this unity consciousness through the love, through the peace, through the compassion, and the presence that we get to choose each and every day. So in these days, in these moments, in these times that are so different than we've ever experienced in our life, play the game of how you can connect deeper in unity versus choosing separation and division, and watch what happens. I would love to hear your comments. I would love to hear what happens when you choose connection and unity versus separation and division. Because boy, do we have such an empowering time to evolve, to expand, and to see the gifts that are growing within us. And now is the time, in this spring, in this leap, that we get to co-create this. And we don't have to look outward. We can easily look inward into our hearts, where that natural unification started from the day we were born and the day we've given birth to this life. So I wanted to thank all of you for this enriching conversation. And thank each of you for just taking the time to see how we can connect more with ourselves, how we can speak more in our unification, and maybe just remind others that doesn't it feel good to be connected in unity versus separating division? Doesn't it feel great when we're not isolated and we can feel that great presence that's within us? Because it may be a smile, it may be a hug, or just a mere act of kindness that can connect us back to what we came from, and that is love. And that is what I so appreciate about each of you, in that love that you get to hear, you get to share, and most important, you get to be. So once again, thank you for joining this podcast. We have so much more to offer in these many weeks to come of what we're sharing, because Hai and I are living this, we're expressing it, and most important, we're being it, and we cannot be more thankful to each and every one of you that are joining us upon this beautiful journey of ascension. Wishing you all the most beautiful and blessed night.